This recipe is epic. This might be one of the most inventive, incredible things that I have ever done for the carnivore world. You guys are gonna wanna stick around for this one because this has been a request for going on 2 years on my channel, and I have been working on it to finally get it right. Today, potato chips, Chris Cookin' Nashville style. So to make these carnivore potato chips, that sounds absolutely insane to say. I know, but it's real. To make these carnivore potato chips, we're going to need a few very simple things. Now, this is based off of this concept of cottage cheese chips. I like some of those cottage cheese chip recipes. I've tried them, but there's a couple of things I wasn't a big fan of when I was looking at these recipes. Number one, the texture just didn't quite get there for me. Number two, a lot of them are made in the microwave, which means you have to make them in very small batches. And let's be honest, if you have a great tasting potato chip, you don't want to eat just one. You probably don't even want to eat 10. You want to eat the whole bowl. So not that I'm going to promote that we eat as many of these as we can possibly fit inside of ourselves, but it does make it helpful with a snack food like this to be able to make it in larger batches. The last thing was I wasn't a huge fan of the flavor of just the cottage cheese by itself, and I noticed most of them use a thickener like xanthan gum, which isn't something that I wanted to use. So I'm going to show you my version to make these carnivore or ketovore if you want to season them certain ways, potato chips. Let's get crunching. The first thing we're going to need is 6 to 8 ounces of some kind of cheese. Now I have Swiss. Anything that is firm and hopefully a little drier in texture is going to make this work the best. You can use any kind of a block cheese that would still melt, but ideally you want it to be as dry of a texture as you can possibly get. So you might be able to use cheddar, although that's going to impart a very strong flavor, but it would work. You could probably use something like mozzarella, but it's going to make the second half of this recipe take a lot longer because of the water content, unless you can get a really dry version. I'm gonna go ahead and shred it up in my food processor, then I'm just gonna leave it in the bowl and I'll show you what we do next. So we've got the cheese chopped up as fine as we can get it using the S-blade of the food processor. It's just gonna make this next step a little bit easier. Using cheese like this is going to offer that stretchy protein that's gonna help bind everything together, which is gonna help us get away from using xanthan gum. The next thing we need to do is add in our cottage cheese. We're going to use roughly equal parts. We're gonna need somewhere around 1.5 cups. Now that our cottage cheese is added in and it's roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, we're gonna go ahead and blitz this together, and I'm gonna turn this into as smooth as a paste as I can possibly get it to be. Then I'm gonna add in 1 egg, and I'll show you what we do with secret ingredients to bring it all together for our final mixture. Now that our paste is completed and we have the egg thoroughly mixed in, we're gonna use a couple of things. This is 2 tablespoons of beef gelatin. Any unflavored gelatin will work. This is gonna give us the springiness and the crispy texture. Gelatin, when introduced to water, it creates those gelatinized crystals that when you then dry out, turn into a crystalline structure that creates the crisp that we're looking for. Also, this is 2 tablespoons of egg white powder. This is mostly there to help absorb moisture, but it's also going to add in some of those egg proteins that help bind everything together, which is why we're not using more than 1 egg. If you try to use something like whey protein or other protein powders, you might be able to do it, but you're probably gonna have to add a second egg, and then you're gonna have to use more of that powder to absorb the moisture. So if possible, I would recommend sticking with egg white powder. The last thing we need to add in is a scant quarter teaspoon of baking soda. This is going to help the protein structure soften and come together. It's also going to react with the very slight acidity that is in cottage cheese. It's not much, and we have a scant quarter, almost even an eighth of a teaspoon that will react with that acidity. It's gonna lighten the mixture, it's gonna help the flavor, and it's gonna help it brown slightly, all of which will give us the perfect carnivore potato chip. So this is the texture we are looking for. We want a thick paste that is still soft, something along the lines of maybe a cake frosting. It is going to look a little grainy because of the cheese. That's totally all right, but that's the texture we want. Now, if you're trying to use something other than egg white powder to do this, this is the texture you're going to want. But like I said, you're probably gonna have to use more egg because the protein of other protein powders does not have the same bonding properties as egg white powder itself. So ideally, I would recommend you use the egg white powder. I can't guarantee what kind of results you'll get if you use other protein powder, but it is possible it would work. Now, we need to get this into either a Ziploc bag that you can cut the corner off of, or in my case, a small piping bag. So now to the problem of how do we cook these without having to do them in batches of like 5 potato chips at a time. Well, the key that I came up with is using a cookie sheet and a whole bunch of parchment paper. So let me show you how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna rip off pieces of parchment paper that are about the same length as the cookie sheet here. We're gonna use our piping bag to pipe out little chips on top of there. And then I'll show you how we put this all together so they can all go in the oven at the same time. So I've torn off 8 sheets of parchment paper. You can reuse the parchment paper if you want to do this in batches. I've got plenty of it around the house, so I'm just going to go ahead and do multiple batches, and I'll show you how I do all of them at the same time. But the first thing we need to do is lay this flat on the counter, 1 piece of parchment for the bottom, and then we're going to put another piece of parchment over the top. You could absolutely use a spoon to do this process, but it would take longer, and I find it to be a lot messier. A piping bag or a Ziploc bag makes it a lot easier. I'm going to pipe dollops, something around like that size, onto the parchment paper, and I'm gonna leave space in between because they're gonna end up getting pressed flat to become potato chips. Judge the size of your cookie sheet on your parchment paper, pipe out your chips, and then I'll show you how we squish them down. Cover them up with parchment paper, grab a cookie sheet, and turn them into chips. So we have 1 entire sheet. I'm just gonna keep repeating this process, and you can either do this with fresh parchment like I'm doing, or you can bake them. After we remove them, you can reuse this parchment and do the exact same thing again. You might have seen some of them are touching a little bit. That's okay, because before these get crispy, they're gonna be soft, and we're gonna be able to cut them apart before I show you how we finish them. Let me go ahead and make the rest of these potato chips, and then I'll show you how we put them in the oven and how long to bake. All right, we ended up getting 12 sheets of 24 each. These are about 1/2 teaspoon of batter. You can make these any size you want, bigger, smaller, whatever you like, but doing it for about 1/2 teaspoon to almost 300 chips. All of these are now gonna go on the cookie sheet in the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. So these took about 30 minutes in the oven at 275. You're going to start seeing a little bit of a brown edge around some of them. That's exactly what we want. And some of them might get a little more brown than others. That's totally okay. We just want them to be set because we're going to let them cool, cut them apart, and they're not crispy yet. I'll show you how we get them nice and crispy, and make sure you stick around to the end because I'm also going to show you a really cool way to season them. Now that these are out of the oven and they are cooled, we can very carefully begin to peel back our top layer of parchment paper. You can see we have these beautifully thin cheese-based carnivore chips. I'm going to trim off the ends, and then these go in the dehydrator. If you have any of these that are stuck together after you get these all peeled and you can see that really well, take something like this pastry scraper or just a plastic knife or something that's not super sharp that won't cut through the parchment paper, and you can just come in and just cut those in two. That way they are separated out. And then what we're gonna do is trim off the ends, the excess paper. And now this goes on a rack to go in my dehydrator. And if it's slightly too wide and it bunches up at the sides, that's fine. You're just gonna get that odd curve like some potato chips have. Now, if you don't have a dehydrator, no need to worry. You can also do this in your oven in single layers on the lowest setting your oven can go to. All you need to do is put the parchment paper directly on the 2 racks of an oven on the lowest setting. It will take a while, probably 1 to 2 hours, but you can do that. You'll just have to do it in batches. If you have a dehydrator, that's ideal. Our chips have been in the dehydrator for a little over an hour. I think they should be done. This is gonna vary depending on how thick your chips are and what the humidity is like wherever you live. But I think ours are done. Let's go grab them, let's pull them out. We're gonna cool them to room temperature, and then I'm gonna show you that secret seasoning we're gonna use to make them amazing. And now for the secret seasoning that I have been promising you. I took 1 cup of sour cream. I stuck it in the dehydrator for about 5 or 6 hours, dehydrated it until it was completely dry, spread across a mat. I ground that up into a powder. I added about 4 tablespoons of dried chives and about 1/3 of a cup of whey protein powder. We are making sour cream and onion flavored potato chips. And here we are with carnivore potato chips.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought indeed? When people started requesting this, I was like, I have no idea how I'm ever gonna make that happen. But here we are.
I had faith in you.
Well, it took a long time to get it right, but I definitely got it right. Now, if you make them thinner, like I did, just by pushing harder, you make them thin, very delicate. It's kind of that style of potato chip. If you're more into like a kettle cooked, thick cut potato chip, just don't squish them down as far and they'll be a little bit smaller around and a little bit thicker. They'll take a little bit longer in the dehydrator, but they're still just as good. You ready to give these a try?
Yeah, I've never even had the experiment, I don't think, of these. So I'm excited. For starters, these look just like potato chips.
Yes, they do.
Really tripping my mind out because they definitely look just like the real thing. So, that crunch? Oh, wow. Get out of here. No way. Hold on. I'm speechless. It's tripping my mind up. I know that these are not potato chips. These actually taste like the real deal, literal potato chips that I remember eating growing up. I love the sour cream and onion vibe. That was one of my favorites. I, on a standard American diet, could eat a whole bag of those and not even think twice. I love how thin they are, how crispy. The seasoning, of course, is great. I also feel like I could eat these plain and they would just taste like a normal potato chip. I mean,
you can season these however you want. You don't have to season them at all. What I would probably do if I do these again is sour cream and onion. I would make the sour cream seasoning way ahead of time. I would sprinkle this over the chips before they go into the dehydrator and it would stick a little bit better. I just wasn't able to get the sour cream seasoning dehydrated and made soon enough to be able to put on the chips when they went into the dehydrator. Otherwise, I think this is exactly what I would do the next time. But if you're not into the sour cream and onion vibe, you can make this however you want, use any seasonings you want. You could just take plain salt. grind it in a mortar and pestle into like a fine powdered salt, because a fine salt is what they would use to season something like this. Sprinkle it over the chips right before they go in the dehydrator or the oven if you dry them out that way.
I am seriously so impressed by this. This is blowing my mind. This may be one of the greatest carnivore recipes that you have ever created. It does not in any way taste like something that it should not. It doesn't taste like egg. It doesn't taste like cheese. It doesn't taste like anything other than an actual potato chip.
Well guys, you can have carnivore potato chips now, and this rounds out a lot of things when you do like my carnivore white bread and you do like a deli style sandwich, and then you can have potato chips with the side of it. Like that's something that a lot of people have done, and you can do that now completely carnivore, or at the very least ketovore easily. And you can have potato chips to go along with it. Like a road trip snack would be awesome to have these if you had a big bag of these in the car.
Oh, definitely.
These are going to be great for kids who you're trying to get to eat a more low-carb, proper human diet, but they love their potato chips. There are so many things I can think of to do with this, and this is just the first recipe using this technique that I have. You guys stick around. There's going to be a lot more of these kinds of things, and I'm going to link everything down below you need to know. The recipe card is on my website. I also have a brand new private community where I'm going to give them some more examples of ways to use this potato chip recipe, different seasonings, a whole bunch of different stuff. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. That link is down below. We'd love for you to come and join us there. Let us support you and encourage you on your proper human diet journey. That's why that group exists. There's a great community there that can help support you and give you ideas of what to do with things like this with my recipes, or maybe even other people's recipes. And I'm going to put extra stuff in there and spend a lot of time just doing the best that I can to help as many of you as possible. So that private group is linked down below. I would love for you guys to join. Thank you guys so much for being here. We love every single one of you. This is Chris Cooking Nashville, my beautiful wife, Ash Taylor. You guys eat your meat, sometimes your potato chips when you can't stop with just one. Love your life. We're going to see you here in the kitchen for a bunch more crazy recipes. And if you like my potato chips, you're going to love this.
No.